getting beat down after the bell. Beat down after the bell. The best late stoppage in mixed martial arts. Beatdown after the bell. Here's your host, TJ DeSantis.
Hey everybody, welcome to Beatdown after the bell of UFC 240. Holloway versus Edgar, wrapped up moments ago at Rogers Centre in Edmonton, Ontario, Canada. Max Blessed Holloway, still your UFC featherweight king. He takes a 5-round decision over the answer Frankie Edgar, 49-45 twice, and then 48-47 on one scorecard. Here to break things down with me, longtime mixed martial artist, OG fan. I was gonna say your Twitter handle. I was gonna say your Twitter handle, but I forgot what it was off the top of my head. Mavy McMav.
Don't even try.
All right, Micah Miller here as well. Micah, we saw a valiant effort by future UFC Hall of Famer Frankie Edgar, but tonight belongs to the blessed one, Max Holloway. Your thoughts on this 25-minute affair that saw Holloway get his hand raised once again?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was a good fight, a good competitive fight, but I think Max really outshone himself in the whole fight. I think he won every scorecard, and then one person gave him Frankie one round, correct? Yeah. You know, I didn't think the fight was super close at all, but I never thought that Frankie was ever really like completely being blown away either.
Right.
You know, he got, I think there were 2 times where he was close to maybe being stopped, or he was on that track.
Yeah.
But he held it together pretty well, and you know, to the best he could do, man. He tried to mix things up with his striking and his takedowns and his movement, and you know, he just ran into a guy who was really well prepared for what he had to bring to the table.
The words future UFC Hall of Famer were uttered multiple times for Frankie Edgar, and I have no argument with that. This man does belong in the UFC Hall of Fame at one point or another, but when you think about what he's done and what he's accomplished, his biggest accomplishments have been at 155 pounds. He looked small tonight fighting Max Holloway at 145 pounds. Joe Rogan talked about potentially moving down to 135. I mean, I don't know if that's really in the cards for Frankie Edgar at this point, but it does seem odd that he had all of his success largely in what made him a Hall of Famer, a weight class above what he fought at tonight. I don't know if Frankie Edgar's going to move forward with his career at 135, but I'm curious what your thoughts would be, Micah, if we saw him at 135 when he was in the midst of his prime. I mean, could Frankie Edgar have been an all-time great at 135 just like he was at 155?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a possibility. I think, you know, part of what made him so great, though, was that he brought some tools to 155 that were really hard to deal with. For the bigger guys at lightweight were trying to really track Frankie down with his footwork and just his speed overall, the way he moved laterally, and that bantamweight style he brought to lightweight, and I think that's what gave him so much success at lightweight. I think if he goes down to bantamweight and he deals with people who are kind of the same as him, I don't know that he would be particularly dominant. Maybe, because look at a fight with Dominic Cruz. You know, who knows how the judges are going to score that fight?
I'd like to see that fight, actually.
I would love to see that fight.
Yeah,
I would love to see that fight. But you know what I mean? Like the judges, like because of the movement style, the way that those guys are trying to more score than go for stoppages. I think, you know, who knows who would have won some of these bantamweight fights, but Frankie's for sure a Hall of Fame shoe-in, no doubt.
Yeah. Let's talk about his performance tonight. It seemed at times that Joe Rogan was almost arguing for Frankie to win some of the rounds. In the latter part, he would get a takedown. I think it was round number 3. He kind of made that argument. I thought Frankie won one round. 2 judges gave it 49-46, which I think was the right scorecard. Frankie came out. He had an aggressive sort of game plan early, but once Max Holloway started firing on all pistons, it seemed like it was Holloway's fight. Did you see anything where you thought Frankie Edgar could have made some proper adjustments and gotten back into this fight and maybe could have won more than one round if you're being generous towards the answer?
No, not really. I think his best chance to win the fight was to go the distance, right? And try to pile the way that he won a lot of these fights in his run up to the championship and some of the defenses he had was he's accumulating rounds and accumulating movement, strikes, movement, a lot of different takedowns, and it piles up. And eventually the judges see that he's the busier guy and they award it to him. With this fight, I think he tried to do the same thing and it didn't pan out. And I think that's really the only real weapons that he had, because I don't see him as the smaller guy. I don't see him knocking out Max Holloway. I knew that he would have a big problem moving the large body of Max Holloway around. Max is super lengthy and the guy's heavy too, you can tell. And I knew that was going to be a big issue for him. So, I thought Frankie's best bet was to be able to get a takedown and maybe apply some kind of submission if Max really went for broke, to just stand up. I think that was his best chance to win this fight. But Max was just too good on the takedown defense. I think he was defended 12 out of 13 takedowns, and the takedown that Frankie got was, Max on his butt for 30 seconds. So, as far as I'm concerned, Max really pitched a shutout with the takedown D, and I thought that was, if anything could have gone more right for Frankie, I thought that is what would have made the biggest difference.
Max Holloway gets it done tonight in, I think, pretty impressive fashion, especially when you consider the type of fight that he turned in against Dustin Poirier. He was very tough, but he took a lot of damage there. There's a lot of questions about Max Holloway in his well-being and concussion-like symptoms, kept him out of some fights. I really think that he has answered that the best way a fighter could, in the sense that he's come back. He had a fantastic performance against Brian Ortega, had a tough, valiant effort against Dustin Poirier, took a lot of shots, did not get knocked out, came back tonight and showed that he can get hit again and still weather the storm. Max Holloway, fantastic fighter, best in the world right now at 145 pounds. The question is, and this was uttered a couple times tonight, and sometimes you kind of got to give a pass for being in the moment, and maybe John Anik and Joe Rogan really do feel this way, saying that Max Holloway is the best 145-pounder of all time. The only other name that I think you could really say is Jose Aldo. Do you feel that Max Holloway is on that level? I know that he's beaten Jose Aldo a couple times, but my question is, do you think that Jose Aldo still, his stock all-time, greatest of all time at 145, is that still higher than Max Holloway's, or has Holloway gotten to that level and is truly the greatest at 145?
Yeah, I kind of have gone back and forth on this. At first glance, I thought that Joe was really quick to call him the greatest of all time, beating Jose Aldo. But because mainly the argument was Jose Aldo has all the title defenses, right? He's got all the big championship fights. He's got more defenses, more fights where that gold was on the line. But when I look a little deeper into Max's record and you just look at the streak that he put on, he was cleaning guys out at 145 in non-championship fights and stopping most of them. And you look at when he got the belt, he's gotten a few title defenses under his belt. He's got a long list of names. So, I think what it boils down to is that Max doesn't have the championship experience that we've seen from Jose Aldo for the defenses. But in terms of just the body of work, yeah, I think he might be the greatest of all time.
It's definitely hard to say, I think, what is fact and what is opinion at this point. And while I believe that you can argue that Max Holloway is the greatest of all time at this point at 145, if he continues to have any success, I think he's going to get there.
Yeah, for sure. No doubt.
I mean, this division, too, is also a bit more competitive than it was when Jose Aldo was the king at 145. And Max Holloway, I honestly, I'm blown away. Like, the fact that he's gone through the adversity that he had, not being able to compete and make some scheduled fight dates, and then coming back, beating Brian Ortega in the way that he did, and then, coming up short against Poirier in a valiant effort, and still now lording over the division. I understand that, some of that progress and progression was last year with the Ortega fight, but I kind of feel like Max Holloway deserves some sort of like comeback fighter of the year type of award. I mean, not that anyone was saying that he was completely shot, but I was very hesitant to say Max Holloway, despite being a better fighter, I think on paper is a shoo-in to beat Brian Ortega. I picked Brian Ortega in that fight. I thought Brian Ortega was doing well in that fight. And then Max Holloway showed what a heart of a champion really is. And, unfortunately for him, it didn't come up that way in the Poirier fight. But Max Holloway has really asserted himself as one of the toughest champions, if not, the toughest champion, I think, to beat in his desired weight class.
Yeah. You look at, especially because the way I see 145 right now, I feel like it's very weak depth wise in the wrestling.
Right.
I think. I can't really remember a time where I feel like there's this many non-wrestlers kind of at the top of a championship kind of weight class.
Right. I mean, even before Aldo, we're talking about guys like, Mike Brown is a pretty good wrestler.
Yeah.
Uriah Faber was a fantastic wrestler. 45 has always had that upper echelon of wrestlers, Chad Mendez, and now Mendez is gone. I mean, who's the best wrestler? I mean, is it Alexander Volkanovski? I don't know.
By default, maybe.
I
don't know.
Yeah.
But when you look at, you're looking at guys like Brian Ortega. He's great jiu-jitsu, but,
right.
Not a lot of offensive takedowns.
Yeah, he's not shooting double legs.
Hanacho Moicano, same. Not a wrestler. Korean Zombie, not a wrestler. Jeremy Stevens, he wants to knock your head off.
Right.
Josh Emmett, he's more interested in striking. Michael Johnson, the list goes on. I think the best wrestling chops really that are kind of out there, might be Zabit.
There you go. Yeah. No, I'll sign off with that.
Yeah.
And while I think he's on the come up, I mean, he's not 2 fights away from a title fight. Probably he's probably got to get 3.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Who knows how they're gonna play that with Zabit? I know he's got a fight coming up with who is it?
I'll look it up.
Mexican kid.
Ultimate
Fighter winner.
Not Brandon Moreno, is it?
No.
He's a different weight class. I'll find out. Hold on. Keep talking.
Yeah. Well, he's got Yair Rodriguez. He's got a fight coming up with Yair Rodriguez. See, I just had to keep talking.
Yeah.
That's if you get lost in radio, you just keep rambling on.
Right. And use some hyperbolic words. You'll be fine.
So yeah, he's got Yair Rodriguez coming up. Again, a guy who doesn't have that wrestling base that we were talking about. How quick are they going to take it with Zabit? You don't really know. You don't really know what's in their cards for him.
If he beats Rodriguez, I got to believe that he's ready for a potential title eliminator. But I don't know. 145 is a completely different weight class than it was a few years ago. Which makes it exciting. But I don't think we have a clear path to a title fight. Which now I guess the question is, they had him on the broadcast a little bit. Alexander Volkanovski is the clear number 1 contender, right? Yeah,
for sure. He's 20-1. Who was his loss to?
I'll look that up too.
Yeah, look it up. It's a guy that it's very rare that a guy makes it that to a title fight with 1 loss. He's really cleaned out the competition. He came up on my radar kind of late. I saw him fight Chad Mendez, and man, I was really impressed. Super impressed with the pressure he brought. Super impressed with his takedown defense despite moving forward constantly, and had great timing on the shots, and ended up putting Chad Mendez away, and that's when I was like, wow, really impressed. And then when he went up against Jose Aldo, it seemed like he was a lot more willing to work harder than Jose was. Even in Jose's hometown, he was ready to just push harder than Jose was willing to push for that fight, and eventually just outworked him. But yeah, Volkanovski to me and Max, I think while he's the clear number 1 challenger for this championship, I think Max takes that fight for sure.
Yeah, I would definitely lean towards Holloway. I'm excited for it. Don't get me wrong. I think that is a compelling fight. It's one that I think they can definitely sell some pay-per-views on. Going back to your question about who Volkanovski has lost to, It's a gentleman named Corey Nelson who beat Volkanovski in Volkanovski's fourth professional bout.
Okay.
Corey Nelson has not fought since 2018. Really hasn't got out of the Australian fight scene. So
Okay.
you kind of chalk that up to, I think, Volkanovski, hitting a bump early in his career, making the right adjustments, and really never turning back. So fantastic stuff, though, tonight by Max Holloway. Let's talk about a really great fight at 145 pounds, but this time in the women's division.
This is what I'm looking forward to talking about right here.
Oh, my goodness. What a fantastic fight we saw between former UFC champion Chris Cyborg and former Invicta FC champion Felicia Spencer. Cyborg, a big favorite tonight, as she almost always is in her fights, coming off that loss to Amanda Nunes. Spencer was game and cut Cyborg early in the first round, and Felicia had a lot of moments, and when you're a plus 400 underdog, you're not really guaranteed anything. You're guaranteed to walk to the octagon and maybe a quick exit. That was not the case for the Phenom tonight. Felicia Spencer comes up short, losing a unanimous decision, but for my money, Felicia Spencer's stock goes up, and she really showed what she has in terms of being able to hang with the best in the world. Not that she hasn't shown that thus far, but fighting the competition to get to the UFC and then getting in the cage with someone like a Chris Cyborg, that's a completely different experience. And I think Felicia Spencer answered that call and did so in a way where she loses tonight, but she won on the list of moral victories were long. You know what I mean? And credit to her.
For sure. They say there's no moral victories in fight sport, but people are going to be talking about Felicia Spencer way more after this fight than any of her fights that she's ever had, right?
Right.
So, looking at the fight, I feel like everybody had the same feeling. Like when she went out there and she kind of took that second shot and didn't seem phased at all.
No.
Didn't seem phased. I've never seen Chris Cyborg hit anyone and them not be phased before.
Well, on a couple levels, she wasn't phased. One, she was able to take the shot and walk through it, showing off her durability. But two, mentally, she didn't get dissuaded at all. I mean, she never stopped fighting. And when you get touched by Chris Cyborg, I mean, how many women have wilted right in front of her? Not necessarily because they were hurt, but because they felt that power and they're like, yep, I don't want to get knocked unconscious.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was most impressed by, because you never want being called tough. You can take it at face value, and it's like a
lot of times it's a backhanded compliment.
Yeah, exactly. In the fight game, if people don't know, when somebody calls you tough, right, or you're a tough round,
you got a good chin.
Roll, you got a good chin,
right?
They're kind of discrediting your skill,
right?
Because there's nothing to talk about skill wise.
Durability is not what you want your first attribute to be in fighting,
right?
I mean, on the Cabbage Correa, like he was a durable fighter. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah, the three little attributes that come up when you walk into the cage, you don't want that to be one of them, because that means people know that it's been tested, which is the whole that's the name of the game, is to not have it tested. But yeah, I was impressed with her ability mentally to be able to take the shots and stay in it. She never turned away after getting hit. She always kept the focus. Like if she got hit, she would kind of roll with it, keep her eyes on what she needed to be watching, and kind of throw back a counter or tie her up in some way. And that really played into her strategy, because if you notice, she never really developed a lot of good offense when they were just out in the open.
Right.
A lot of that was Chris using her jab and the low kicks really well out in the open. But I feel like a lot of her best moments were when Chris was getting more aggressive. She timed some good elbows that were coming in on the way, using Chris's aggressiveness coming in to really to open that cut up in the first round, and in using that kind of momentum of Chris's aggressiveness against her and then tying her up, getting her tired. I feel like once Chris kind of figured that out and saw that she was kind of burning a little too much energy, and that doing that was kind of taking some of her stamina away, and given while what's her name?
Felicia Spencer.
While Felicia Spencer was pushing her against the fence, she didn't complete any takedowns, tried to pull guard, so she just had to weather the storm and be able to put the fight out in the open so that she could use those tools that Jason Perillo was trying to get her to use.
Looking at Felicia, she really started her pace off quickly by cutting Cyborg with an elbow, and I think that was actually really telling for Chris Cyborg. Cyborg coming off a loss only for the second time in her career, the first time walking to the cage after losing a fight in 13 years. You got to go back 13 years to her second pro fight to when that happened the last time. And when we saw Cyborg take that shot and continue to move and be aggressive and continue to fight through the durability of Felicia Spencer, because honestly, it was a tough fight for Chris Cyborg. She was in control pretty much the entire time, but she was standing in front of an opponent that wasn't willing to go away. And she hasn't had that all that many times in her career. And if she was not in it mentally at all, I think we were going to be a little bit worried, and maybe Cyborg would have been in trouble. That was not the case. She proved that she still can hang with anybody, which really rises the stock of Amanda Nunes even more. Not that she needs any more help to be called the greatest featherweight or greatest women's fighter of all time, but Cyborg, I don't think has lost a step per se, despite coming off that loss to Amanda Nunes, which really begs the question, what is next for Chris Cyborg? She talked about testing the free agency market following this fight. I mean, to me, the only fight that I really want to see Chris Cyborg have next is a showdown with Amanda Nunes. When you look at the long resume of Cyborg, I feel that she definitely deserves to try to regain that throne and that mantle of being the best 145-pounder on the planet. But I guess we'll see if the money is right, if she could potentially go to boxing. I mean, there's a fight with Julia Budd, I think, in Bellator that's a real interesting fight for her. But at the end of the day, if you're Chris Cyborg, I think she wants to be heralded as the best fighter in the world at 145 pounds. And the only way to do that, Micah, is to beat Amanda Nunes inside the Ultimate Fighting Championship.
Yeah, I think she's in an interesting position, though. She has a lot of options, I think, for way more than most female fighters out there. I think, and some of these options, they don't look like they're really long-term deals, right? They're like a boxing match here, you mentioned that fight in Bellator. Maybe she could go to one, and they would find some kind of use for her there. But as far as long-term, I don't really know how that's going to go, because she signs a one-fight deal with the UFC and she wins, then she's going to be stuck in the automatic renewal clause, right? Who knows if that's really something that she even wants to do? You never know what's going on management-wise with the company and some of these things. You know what I mean?
You're talking about that automatic renewal clause. Maybe some people don't understand how UFC contracts work. I mean, once you become a champion and the UFC owns your rights, it can kind of go ongoing. If there was anyone to break that, maybe you could see Cyborg get some special considerations for her moving forward. I'm not sure, but here's another thing too. If she comes up, win or lose with Cyborg in the UFC, I mean, the 145-pound division has a lot of growing and maturing to do underneath both Nunes and Cyborg. I mean, the UFC might be in a tough situation really at 145, signing Cyborg to a multiple fight deal. Maybe they're not even all that interested in it, because if win, lose, or draw against Amanda Nunes, I mean, the best thing I think for the UFC would to see Cyborg beat Nunes, and you can have a rubber match.
Right.
But beyond that, what are you going to do with Cyborg? I mean, there are some fighters at 145 that I think can continue to rise the ranks. I mean, Felicia Spencer is a true prospect at 145, but I mean, I don't even know who Felicia Spencer beats to try to get another title fight. It's very tough to build up that division.
Yeah, that division is that's the least interesting division that the UFC has, for sure, right? I mean, it doesn't have a lot of depth, and it's pretty much just there because they need some kind of system that's going to produce Cyborg opponents. That's really only the purpose that it serves now.
Thus far, that system has been Invicta Fighting Championships.
Right. Who do you see coming up in the ranks there that might that might give some value to the UFC 145 division if they were to move up?
As far as Invicta's concerned, I think just we're 2 weeks away from an Invicta FC title fight at 145 that features Caitlin Young, who fought Gina Carano a decade ago and is on a nice upswing.
Oh, wow.
I mean, she's doing well for herself. She takes on Pam Sorensen, who just fought Felicia Spencer late last fall for the Invicta FC title, and Felicia won that fight and moved on. There's some intrigue there on who will win that fight and where they will go after that. I mean, to me, in a perfect world, and I'm a bit biased, I want to see, these talents do well in Invicta and stay there and defend a title. But I think we need to see the pause button on fighters at 145 and Invicta being pushed up right away to the UFC, because the only way that this talent pool gets bigger and better is if they're allowed to face off and build some history with one another and progressively move up the ranks. I mean, the problem is that the depth at 145, it's just it's shallow in numbers. It's just not even when it comes to talent, just not enough established fighters. I mean, Felicia Spencer fought one of the greatest fighters in combat sports history tonight in Chris Cyborg in her 8th professional fight.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen in modern day mixed martial arts. You know what I mean? And
it's absurd. Really.
I mean, I'm not going to, I think Felicia Spencer showed that her mettle is definitely tough enough to face off with someone like Cyborg, but you would like to think that someone with the experience that Felicia Spencer has wouldn't be fighting someone like Cyborg until her 13th, 14th, 15th fight in mixed martial arts, but that's just not the case at 145.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta, like, if we flip this around, right, and we did this at 155, like, it's kind of like the UFC signing Sage Northcutt and putting him in the UFC title fight. I mean, it's really what it is.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, how many fighters nowadays make their UFC debuts less than 10 fights into their career? It's not something you see all that often.
Yeah, I mean, and I think I said this last time, but man, I think people really need to slow down on the call-ups.
Right.
You mentioned pressing the pause button for the division's sake, but man, if that's gonna be like an actual division that they're gonna put an emphasis on, and it's gonna stay in the UFC, you gotta hit the pause button and you gotta start developing that talent, because, like you said, they're shallow in numbers, and the skill there's a skill disparity too. So,
and those fighters are only going to get better by getting their reps in, and making the walk to the sport's most iconic cage is not getting your reps in the right way.
No, not at all. It's too much too soon. We've seen, in my opinion, a little too much of that lately in the past couple of years with some of these guys getting signed right away. But to be groomed by the promotion. But man, I don't know that the UFC or Bellator or any of these major organizations are the ones who should be kind of grooming early talent. I think that's a whole different phase in itself, and that needs to be done. All that needs to be done before you get to these shows.
And I think that's kind of part of the problem too. When you look at 145 pounds, Invicta is grooming and building talent, but all those fighters want to go and get more opportunities in the Bellator in the UFC cages, and it's like that's very hard when, if you're 6-0, 7-0, you're top 5 in the world fighting someone like Chris Cyborg. Like, how do you build anyone in Invicta when both Bellator and the UFC are like, who do you got? We need somebody. Let's grab you. And it's
how do you do it? It's simple. It's not easy. It's very simple. You tell a fighter no.
Right, but I mean,
you're not ready for this.
But
trust me, you got to have somebody that cares about you and your career to say no.
The problem is the promoter doesn't care about that. The promoter goes, we need to put on fights. We have a division that, we have 50 some odd events every year. We got to get these fighters fights, and who are we going to grab? And and
you're going to call people up, and you're going to do what? You're going to say, hey, we got a slot to fill, right?
Right.
Well, here's some cash.
Right.
Here it is. Here's some more. You said no, here's some more.
Right.
And you got to have somebody who's mature enough, and have people that are around you that are mature enough to hit the pause button again and say, I'm not ready for this yet. We're going to get there.
Right.
But we're not ready for this now.
One good thing, though, that I think we have for the division is Bellator, the UFC, Invicta being dedicated to putting on 145-pound fights in the women's side of the sport. So the young athletes that are thinking, hey, what do I want to do with my life? Well, mixed martial arts is an honest to goodness opportunity, where I think the reason that this division is a bit slow is we haven't seen it promoted at the highest level outside of just one-off attractions. Now we have multiple high-level pro divisions where there is money at stake. There are belts, recognition on an international stage. Now, hopefully, we have 18, 19-year-old women going, okay, I'm a natural 145-pounder. I want to fight here. I don't want to kill myself and move down to 135. I mean, one of the biggest problems, and she's looked good at 135, is a fighter in Macy Chasson who won the Ultimate Fighter at 145 pounds, got in the UFC, and promptly moved down to bantamweight. And she's a natural 145-pound fighter. That cut for her, while she makes it, it's a difficult cut. It's unfortunate to see her want to move down to bantamweight when we could be talking about Macy Chasson as someone who is 2, 3, 4 fights away from fighting someone like Amanda Nunes or Chris Cyborg. Instead, we're talking about her as a prospect at 135 pounds.
Yeah, I mean, you got to remember too that how big are these women? I think they said Chris Cyborg was like 180,
right,
or something.
Yeah,
I definitely believe that. I think you're drawing from women who are, there's not a lot of 180, 175 pound
right
women just overall. If you just look at the numbers, most women aren't usually that size. So that, I think that's part of the shallow pool issue that we're experiencing right now. But
there are fighters though, like say Kat Zingano, who fought Megan Anderson not long ago at 145. Like, if you're on the larger side of the bantamweight division, maybe you consider taking fights at 145. I think there are plenty of fighters at 35 that spice up that 145-pound division. But at the end of the day, I mean, how many people really want to sign up and fight someone like Chris Cyborg? I mean, they're going to have to deal with someone like Amanda Nunes no matter what. But I mean, you can sort of tease them maybe and intrigue them to move up to featherweight by saying, look, the path to a title is much shorter than it is at 135. But at the end of the day, how much can you really ask of Amanda Nunes being a dual champion? I mean, she can't fight 6 times a year. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know how much you can entice somebody with the belt anyway. I mean, look at Jermaine Durandamy.
Right, yeah.
Could she have cared less about the UFC championship belt?
Well, I mean, a lot of people said she just didn't want to fight Cyborg. But, I mean, at the end of the day, you are right. Like, fighting Cyborg and retaining a title or hoping to retain the 145-pound title was not something she was interested in doing.
And, I think her reasoning was that Cyborg has been already caught for performance-enhancing drugs, and that's not somebody that she wanted to share the cage with. So the UFC says, okay.
But I mean, we're in the USADA era. I mean, we were talking earlier. I looked online at the amount of times that Chris Cyborg was tested this year. We're talking about 8 times in 2019. Yeah. I mean, that's more than once a month. We're only in the 7th month of the year. She's been tested 8 times, and I mean, due diligence is being done. I understand where Jermaine may be hesitant to fight Cyborg with her sordid past when it comes to PEDs, but at the end of the day, USADA's doing their part.
I think, man, the biggest difference between men and women in the performance-enhancing drugs thing is that if a woman is using steroids like that for a long amount of time, it's going to change her body in a way that it doesn't change a man. You know what I mean? And I think those effects can stick around with a woman instead of a man when you're playing with your natural hormone levels and you're going up and down. With a woman, it's like I have a feeling that the benefits that you get, they might stick around, especially if you've been using them for a long time. You know what I mean?
I mean, I'm not an endocrinologist.
Yeah,
I don't know. But yeah, I don't know. I think
if you use for a decade and you get off, I don't think you can completely erase the decade. Is what I'm saying here.
You might be onto something, and I think that is definitely the thought process with someone like Jermaine Durandamy, who wanted no business fighting Chris Cyborg. He's Micah Miller. I'm TJ DeSantis. This is Beatdown After the Bell of UFC 240, Holloway versus Edgar. Appreciate you joining us tonight on Mixler.com or, of course, YouTube. We are here courtesy of Cappers Direct. Please support them. I'll get you fight picks for all of the upcoming events and hopefully get some money in your pocket. Jeff Neal, he gets some money in his pocket, defeating Nico Price. TKO via ground and pound ends the bout at 2 minutes and 39 seconds of round number 2. This was just a crazy fight.
Yeah.
And it was a fight that Nico Price, was comfortable in despite, coming up short. This guy lives and breathes chaos, and we definitely had some chaos. I mean, he was on his back throwing hammer fists, so fun stuff. I don't know where the performance of the night bonuses stand. I will definitely take a look at that here in a moment, but this one definitely had some fireworks, round and a half in.
Yeah, I mean, Nico is always a threat for that, right? I mean, the guy is just an animal. This was one of the fights I was looking forward to on this card because I know Nico brings that to the table, and I think his last fight that he had, he won by knockout from the bottom. You don't see that in MMA a lot.
No, the last time I saw that was in the Pride FC video game.
Yeah.
And that's when he had energy bars and it just take, one punch because he took so much on the feet.
Yeah.
When my friend and I used to play that game and that would happen, we'd say it was a TKO cut. Like you got cut when you were on the feet and you got knocked out from, being mounted on somebody, but still, it was from the damage done earlier.
Yeah. You're talking about PS2, right?
Of course. Yeah.
Oh, man. UFC Undisputed 3 is still the best Pride game, though.
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. Quadros and Rudin on commentary.
Yeah. Oh, man.
So good.
Amazing.
Yeah.
You still have that?
I did for the PlayStation 3, but I don't have a PlayStation 3.
Yeah.
So
I need to get that one.
Yeah.
But yeah, don't want to steal the shine from these guys. The fight was awesome. I thought Hands of Steel had a good game plan.
Say that again.
Hands.
Right, with a Z.
Steel.
Because he's nasty.
Yeah. He had the right approach as far as, trying to be light on your feet, trying to use the space well, take your time, don't get caught in a lot of these crazy exchanges. He did get suckered into that game a little bit though, and credit to Nico for really forcing that issue, and having some good moments, but ultimately the ground and pound is what got it done, and man, he looked great throwing from inside the guard. I don't know the last time I saw somebody really get stopped like that inside the guard, but anytime you can do that, that's power that really stands out to me, because the guard is really a position where you see a lot of transition, right? You're seeing, is the guy going to get up? Is the guy going to pass? Is the guy's going to punch a little bit? When somebody stops you from inside the guard, that puts people that are going to fight this guy
right
on notice. Like, this guy stopped somebody inside the guard. Like that's significant power. So really good for performance, and looking forward to seeing him fight again.
No doubt about it. And he gets some extra money, extra $50K for his work tonight. Jeff Neal and Hakeem Dawodu, getting performance of the night. Fight of the night belongs to Davidson Figueroa and Alexander Pantoja. Really fantastic stuff there earlier in the night. This was a fun fight card. Maybe not the biggest names on the undercard per se, but it definitely was solid stuff if you tuned in early. But going back to Jeff Neal, he gets it done tonight, moving forward with a big win over Nico Price. A unanimous decision goes the way of Arman Sukarian. He defeated Olivier Aubin-Mercier. Christophe Jocko victorious over Marc-Andre Barral. That was your main card. Not too much to say really about everything here tonight underneath the co-main event. It's hard. This is a busy month of mixed martial arts, and August starts off really, really strong, but kind of tough for these guys to steal the show a little bit when we've had some top heavy UFC cards. But I definitely think between the co-main event and the main event, Definitely worth the money tonight on ESPN Plus.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that the fights, while you like you said, they might have lacked kind of that star power that you're looking for.
Right.
I thought the fights that did take place on the main card, the three main fights, I thought everybody really went after it. So and that's all you can ask for.
No doubt. Let's look ahead a little bit to next week. We got the UFC on ESPN 5. Colby Covington takes on Robbie Lawler in the main event. Colby Covington's talking about how he's going to take on Kamaru Usman after he gets this win over Robbie Lawler. Don't necessarily know where Jorge Masvidal fits into that. Obviously, it is Covington's teammate. Maybe some discussion already inside the team down at ATT on that. But really fun fight at 170 pounds. And I think win, lose, or draw, the UFC will ultimately say what is next for Colby Covington. But you got to believe that he needs some style points if he wants to surpass Jorge Masvidal as far as what the UFC wants to do from a marketing standpoint.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I'm really looking forward to this fight big time. Colby has really talked a big game. He's backed it up, and I think he's turned himself into kind of that guy that they want to see him get the crap kicked out of him, right?
Right, yeah. I mean, the promo where he's wearing the Make America Great hat and the sunglasses, like Colby Covington has turned himself into mixed martial arts premier heel.
Yeah. And it's really been crazy to watch the evolution. If you look at, I think, his real credible run started in Singapore when he took on Dong Yong Kim. Stun Gun, man.
Yeah.
Great nickname. Had a really good dominant victory, and then from there, man, he just really took off, started speaking his mind more, and found himself in fights that are vying for championship gold. As far as your point goes about the style points needed, I mean, how do you top Jorge Masvidal?
You don't.
You can't.
You don't.
You can't. You're
5
talking
seconds.
Historic stuff.
5 seconds over a guy who's previously undefeated, and many said he might be the greatest welterweight we've ever seen.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, you need something big. But, yeah, I do think that this fight is the last piece of the puzzle that need to put together the welterweight picture moving forward.
Right.
Because if I'm UFC and I'm making the fights, I put Jorge Masvidal in the fight with Kamaru Usman.
Mm-hmm.
If he wins, Leon Edwards and Jorge Masvidal is the first pay-per-view. And it's going to be massive.
Oh, yeah.
Massive.
I mean, the promo will be the whole, backstage thing, the arms behind his back, and then cut to the arms behind his back against Askren, and then who knows what would happen in the Usman fight. I mean, at this point, I'm not ever going to pick against Jorge Masvidal ever again, because I pick against him every single time he wins.
Yeah.
And I almost pick him to beat some bigger names, throughout his career, and he's always just come up a little bit short. Something is clicking for Jorge Masvidal in a manner where it's scary how easy he's made everything look as of late.
Yeah, trust me, it hasn't been easy. Full disclosure, he's a really good friend of mine. I've gotten to really see this stuff up close. I went and lived with them, and did his camp with Darren Till, and I can attest to it, man. He's mentally clear in a way that he hasn't really been before in his career. Right. And, taking out a lot of distractions, and he is on a mission. I think he sees the end of his career, and it's kind of like, I feel like it's, when you have 30 seconds left, you have the energy to sprint.
Right.
I feel like that's where he's at his career. He can see the end. He can see that last 30 seconds, and he's ready to just sprint his ass off and really go for it.
Not only is he sprinting, but his stride is much larger than it's ever been. So he's moving faster and covering more ground, and it's very hard to say that anybody can really stop the momentum that is behind Gamebred and Jorge Masvidal. And we're talking a little bit about divisions and change. We were talking about it with Max Holloway in the 145-pound division and where it is now compared to where it was a few years ago. The only division that I think is more different than it was a few years ago is 170 pounds. I mean, this is a division that it's always been lorded over by the champion. For the longest time, it was Matt Hughes. For the longest time after that, it was George St. Pierre. And then we had a transitional period where we saw Johnny Hendricks and Robbie Lawler, switch back and forth, and then it was Tyron Woodley for the better part of 2.5 years, and now we have Kamaru Usman, who's fresh on that championship run. Like, if Kamaru were to drop it to either Colby Covington or Jorge Masvidal, heck, Robbie Lawler's still in there somewhere. It's very difficult to say that we have a champion right now that is going to be a champion for 3, 4, 5 title defenses. And I don't even know who is most likely to not only, win that next title fight, but to do so and defend it 3 or 4 times. It's a crapshoot right now at 170. And we really haven't had that, I think, pretty much in the 20-year history that 170 has been an established weight class.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, if you look at the depth of this weight class, it's the most ridiculous weight class the UFC has right now.
Yeah,
I mean, it is crazy, and I think it's the 170 has always been deep, but it's deeper than it's ever been right now. And I think that we're in a period of, I would say, the late 2000s when the 205 title was just changing like hotcakes.
Right, yeah.
They're just passing it back and forth.
It was Forrest Griffin, Rashad Evans, it was Quentin Jackson, and then Machida. Shogun and Machida, and then John Jones. Yeah.
Then John Jones, and then from there it's been all John.
Stalled out.
I think we're in that period right now where welterweight is so deep and it's so competitive that we could see an era like that where the title just changes hands over and over, because any of these guys on any given day can get the job done over one or the other, and there's so much firepower in that weight class, man.
I mean, we're talking about Masvidal, who may very well be the number 1 contender right now at 170 pounds. No offense to Colby Covington, he's got some work coming up next weekend. I mean, this time next week we could be talking about how it's clearly Colby Covington, but let me read the top 5 at 170 in the UFC right now according to their rankings. Obviously, you have the champion and Kamaru Usman, but beyond that, Tyron Woodley still very much a factor. He came up short to Usman, so he doesn't lose that sort of contender status. And then right behind him, Colby Covington. Then it's Jorge Masvidal. Then it's Leon Edwards, and now we're looking at Dos Anjos, who's definitely come up short against Leon Edwards a week ago. There's Darren Till, Stephen Thompson, Santiago Ponzinibbio, who is a clear force at 170, but he's so far down the list. I mean, Anthony Pettis is in that mix. He's got a fight coming up with Nate Diaz. 170 is the most debatable, contested, I think, division when it comes to contenders out there right now. We can make an argument for any of those guys to go on a run and get a title fight.
Yeah, and hey, if Nate Diaz wins against Anthony Pettis,
seriously,
you're gonna see him on that list, and who the hell knows what they're gonna do with that?
Right.
Maybe,
I have no idea what that fight is gonna look like either. It's crazy.
I kind of have an idea, but because I've spent some time with Nate in their training camp a couple of times, and I know they've been talking about fighting Pettis for 10 years.
Wow.
So yeah, they don't like each other, and
Nate doesn't like anybody.
Yeah, Nate doesn't like Nate respects certain people though.
Sure, I think he respects everyone.
He doesn't like there's certain guys that he's like he don't like that guy.
Well, I mean, here's the thing about the Diaz brothers. They definitely have a distaste for a lot of people. I think they respect almost everybody. But if you are comparable in size to them and you put on gloves, they don't like you.
No, yeah. No, there's something to be said for that. And I think part of the they don't like flash. Right?
Yeah.
And who's flashier than Showtime, right?
Pretty much.
So that's going to be a real good fight to kind of see who might break into that next echelon of the top welterweights, but and who knows that they talked about putting Masvidal and a Diaz brother not too long ago,
right? Yeah.
If Colby gets a really big win, and they do decide to move forward with Usman and Colby,
right?
Maybe they make a big main event with Masvidal and Nate Diaz.
And I mean, whoever wins the title next at 170 might just call out Nick Diaz.
Yeah,
Nick, not Nate. Nick.
Right.
That's where the money fight's at.
Right. And
that's not a shot at Tyron Woodley, I promise.
But you don't know, they promised Masvidal a title shot, right? For to get him to sign for this last fight, they promised him a title shot. So who knows? Is he going to wait and cash that in, or is he going to wait for
I love how you say, is he going to wait and cash it in like it's money in the
bank?
Yeah,
right. No, but I mean, depending on how that fight shakes out, because then you're gonna have Usman taking on Colby.
Yeah.
Colby wins that fight, then it's teammate versus teammate, roommate versus roommate.
And they'll fight too, probably.
Yeah. No, they no doubt they'll fight. Yeah. They're both gonna demand 7-figure paydays to fight each other, and they're gonna get it.
If I'm writing the paycheck, dude, like I can't say that it's not worth the money.
Oh,
you know
of course
what I mean?
not. You're gonna use that footage of them wrestling in the living room for this fight for sure, man.
That's what I want. I want them to drive to the venue together, too.
Yeah.
Like why not? They can share the same locker room.
Yeah.
I don't know. I love it.
There's so much possibility welterweight.
Right.
It's so exciting right now.
Yeah, it's fantastic, and I mean, it really is a great time to be a mixed martial arts fan. I understand that there's a lot of quantity when it comes to week in, week out. We're in the middle of a very long stretch of mixed martial arts fights by the UFC alone. I mean, we were talking earlier. Gleason Seabow and Will Brooks fought the other day in China, and I had no idea. I mean, if it weren't for an odd stoppage, this would have never come to my attention.
Yeah.
Granted, they aren't, on the same level that they were a few years ago, but like high-level mixed martial arts is happening pretty much every single night all over the world.
Yeah.
And if you're able to pick and choose and not get burnt out, it's a fantastic time to be a mixed martial arts fan. It's not necessarily what it was a decade ago or 15 years ago when you got 5 UFCs a year, and when it came to Friday night fight night for the UFC, it was like Christmas. But the fact that we have as much high quality MMA as we do in 2019, it truly is a great time to be a fan.
Yeah, for sure. Are you thinking 2000 is 10 years ago again, TJ?
2000. I mean, 2003, 2004. That was
just stretching it.
16 years ago.
No, it just hit me when I came here. I was like, oh man, Colby and Robbie's next week.
Yeah.
Those keep happening. It's like, oh man, who's fighting this week? Oh man, that's already
right.
Because these cards aren't really condensed more; they're more spread out.
Right.
With some of these guys getting more. The one positive of that, I think, is you're gonna have certain guys. They're gonna get that main event shine that I feel like they should get. You know what I mean? I think that's good to promoting these next big stars, is for them to get a big platform,
right?
And not be not kind of be buried on lower on a card where maybe they wouldn't get as much attention, because they definitely deserve it.
It's crazy. Next week, I think the prelims start at noon Pacific time, 3 East. That's an early fight card, and I kind of like that. I mean, think about traditional sports. Like, you don't usually have to wait until 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, past midnight,
1 a.m.
right, on the East Coast to see the premier football game of the week. But that's how it's always worked in fight night. And I don't know, fight afternoon. It doesn't have the same ring, but I like it.
Yeah, I want it to. I don't want it to be at 1 a.m.
right,
for sure. But I do like the fact that it's at night. There's something I like about it. I like that it's fight night. It's like the thing that
spend 9 straight Saturday nights away from your family and then get back to me.
All right.
But I'm blessed, right? Like, I could have a shitty job.
Are you on the Blessed Express?
Yes. Why not? I mean, if I can throw strikes like that, sign me up. All right. But yeah. So I will not be here for Beatdown After the Bell next week. I apologize for that. I'll be coming back from Island Fights, which takes place in Pensacola. I should try to figure out how to.
Man, so we're not going to be able to talk about Robbie and Colby.
No, I mean, I could definitely do Beatdown After the Bell that night after I get back, but it's not going to have the same sort of feel.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't even gotten my itinerary yet, so like maybe I get out at like 5 a.m. and I'm back in time, but. Flying from Florida to California, it's a daunting task.
Yeah, and going west to east is way worse.
It is. It definitely
way
is.
Worse.
Well, you get on the flight at like 10 a.m. And then you end up getting in Florida somehow at like 1 a.m. You know what I mean? Like you lose the whole day.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. I don't know. We'll figure it out.
Because I know you're excited about that Jim Miller Clay Guida co-main.
Hey. It's going to be a good fight.
It's a 2010 flashback.
It's just not exactly what I thought we would see for co-main events in 2019. But who's to deny Jim Miller and Clay Guida?
I mean, you have what does Jim Miller have, the most fights in the history of the UFC,
and Clay Guida has the most frenetic energy in UFC history. So
for sure,
man.
No, I'm looking forward to that one. That's gonna be a good fight
for sure.
And Clay, guys, I say this again, guys are doing better older right now.
It's funny how that works.
It's really weird. You're seeing it for some of the women too.
It's something that we've seen for literally a decade and a half in the heavyweight division. Let's not forget that UFC 28 veteran Andrei Arlovsky fought last weekend and got a win in the UFC.
Set all kinds of heavyweight records.
Seriously, yeah.
In that win and doing so.
Right, but I mean, we're starting to see it, like you said, at 155. Like Clay Guida and Jim Miller is still a decent fight in 2019.
Yeah.
And I think the lifespan of female fighters is much longer than it is in the male side. I mean, we've seen in Invicta, we've seen a lot of fighters make the debut on the north side of the Randy Couture line, which is 35. I mean, they make their pro debut at 36, 37. I think last year we had a fighter, maybe it was 2 years ago, make their pro debut at 39 years old. Like, I don't think she's going to go on to be a world champion per se.
Right.
But the fact that women at the highest level are making their debut in the latter part of their 30s, that's just not something we're used to in mixed martial arts. And I think you can argue that they don't hit their stride in their prime until later in life. What
do you think that is?
I don't know. I don't know. One thing that I do think it is someone that is making their debut in mixed martial arts at 35, 36. They've been training for like 6 or 7 years. You know, they've got the proper amount of training. I was talking to a buddy of mine who made his pro debut 4 months into fighting 15 years ago. You know what I mean? That's what it was. You would train with an MMA team, and then if you were there for 2 months, you just get roped into some fight in a barn, and you just rolled with it. You know, I mean, how many times have you seen someone come out of a crowd in an unregulated state? You know, their blood alcohol level is 0.1, and they go home with an 0-1 pro record. You know what I mean? That's the way it used to be. But I think now when athletes are allowed to be athletes and grow as athletes, you're going to see a much more calculated approach. And I think that's largely why we're seeing some women, make their debuts at 34, 35 years old and they do so and have success, into the latter part of their 30s, into their early part of their 40s.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a shift taking place amongst the field overall.
It's a profession, right? I mean, it's
professional
sports.
Yeah, it's like throughout the whole organization and the whole sport. Because I feel like even more now they've been putting a lot of these fights together where it's like they're banking on the young gun to stomp the veteran. And I feel like the veteran is winning more of the fights than how it used to go. You know what I mean? Where you think that the young gun is going to take over, and the veteran is just not going to go anywhere. It's you hear that a lot. You hear it's my time. I think everybody thinks it's their time when you're 22.
Right, yeah.
But
I've waited so long. I've waited 22 years for this. Well, no, you haven't. I mean, you've waited like 3 years for this, and the rest doesn't count because you weren't training.
And then you go through the hell of 10 years. That is 10 years in mixed martial arts. And if you can come out the other end in decent shape, then you have a different perspective, and you have a deeper skill set. You have more maturity.
Right.
And even though people say like, oh, you might not be as athletic as you used to be, I don't know, man. A good example is, I think we were just talking about him. Jorge Masvidal is 34, going on 35. Right. There's nothing I've seen of that guy where it's like slowing down at all.
And think about this, like when you bring up Masvidal, if we rewind the clock and look at Masvidal when he moved up to 170 pounds, like if we stopped his career at that point, what are we gonna even say about Masvidal? Like he was a tough guy. He had some really great performances, but unfortunately only won the fight on one judge's scorecard.
Never broke through.
Right. And now at 170, we're talking about Jorge Masvidal in a completely different light. I'm not going to say he's the greatest mixed martial artist of all time, but he's one of the greatest stories of all time. He's one of the greatest at 170 right now, and who knows what he can continue to do. Like maybe he does author a championship reign that puts him on the short list with guys like George St. Pierre and Matt Hughes. It's a long shot, but this entire story has been a long shot.
Yeah.
I mean, Jorge Masvidal is 1 or 2 fights away from a UFC world title. That's not the guy that, was on that Strikeforce run.
Yeah.
That's not the guy that got inverted triangle choked by Toby Imada.
Yeah.
Jorge Masvidal is a bad man.
Yeah.
And it's 2019. And he has no signs of slowing down.
No signs of slowing down. You know, Robbie's fighting next weekend. I thought Robbie looked fantastic. In his last fight with Ben Askren. I was like, wow, you're 36? Like,
people were selling stock on Robbie Lawler at UFC 42 when he lost to Pete Spratt.
Yeah.
You know, like Robbie Lawler was the guy that can't defend low kicks.
Yeah.
And then Melvin Manoof tried to exploit that and got his head knocked off.
Yeah.
Like, that's the same guy that's fighting next week. Like,
yeah.
That's mind-blowing.
Yeah. And, you know, a guy that never, I think he doesn't buy into any of that.
Right.
And that slowing down stuff. He's like, this is me, where I'm at right now, and I'm going to get better where I'm at right now. Like when he came to ATT, the guy had been in the game for over 10 years, and he's still adding new elements to his game. You know, with working with the coaches and everything. So, you know, I think that's the kind of longevity we're seeing. I think people just look at it differently now.
Without a doubt. I mean, I think it goes back to what we were talking about. Guys like Robbie Lawler and Masvidal, they came up at a time where fighting was something that was an opportunity and maybe a way to make some money and sort of stay out of trouble. But now, like, they've been able to survive and flourish in a time where you're not a fighter, you're a pro athlete. Mm-hmm. And there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars for you to go out there and cash in on. And my heart is warmed when I see guys like Robbie Lawler and Jorge Masvidal cashing in on those paydays. Those guys deserve it. I mean,
no doubt.
Look at a teammate of Robbie Lawler, Jens Pulver. Jens Pulver, for me, is a UFC Hall of Famer.
Why isn't he in the Hall of Fame? I see his
Why
manager.
is he playing Twitch for money?
I see him and Brian Butler as manager, always like campaigning with all the hashtag.
Jens Pulver needs a job.
Yeah.
Jens Pulver should be an analyst. Jens Pulver deserves so much more than he has.
Yeah.
But
why is he in the Hall of Fame?
That's not my decision.
I don't understand it. There's something behind the scenes that we don't know about.
He's had a contentious relationship with Dana White in the UFC for a very long time. I mean, let's not forget that he's the guy that left the UFC as the champion because they couldn't come to contract terms. Mm-hmm. Jens Pulver, I thought, was going to be a WEC commentator until he came back and he fought and he still wanted to fight. And I don't know if they gave him an ultimatum, but there was some sort of breakdown in communication there. And I don't know. Jens Pulver shouldn't be a forgotten artifact of MMA. And unfortunately he is.
Yeah, I mean, I have faith that one day he'll be enshrined the way he should be enshrined. I think if you look at
what we need, I love the UFC Hall of Fame. I think it's a great marketing tool for them.
Yeah.
We need a Hall of Fame that is backed by independent journalists in mixed martial arts.
Yeah.
We need a Hall of Fame that, I mean, there are so many things that we can say is like Jeremy Horn. Jeremy Horn is not a UFC Hall of Famer, but he's a mixed martial arts Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you can argue that Mirko Krokop is a mixed martial arts Hall of Famer, but isn't a UFC Hall of Famer.
Yeah, if you look at his UFC tenure,
right.
It doesn't blow you away.
Takanori Gomi belongs in a Hall of Fame.
Right.
Not for anything that he did in the UFC.
Yeah. I mean, that guy, people don't even know that guy.
Right.
People have no clue what that guy was.
No.
And because, he didn't show up like that.
For a lot of people, Takanori Gomi's biggest UFC or biggest mixed martial arts win is a knockout over Tyson Griffin.
Yeah, he turned the clock back a little bit on that.
Right, but I mean, like, that's not his biggest win.
Yeah, no, his biggest win is for sure Hayata Sakurai.
Without a doubt.
Taking the title in amazing fashion.
Without a doubt. It's unfortunate.
Yeah.
And
But no, I agree with you. You need an independent body, but that's the UFC shtick, right? They're not given any kind of leeway to anybody else to control anything.
At least with their ranking system, there's some transparency with independent panelists.
But they disregard it whenever they feel like it.
Well, I mean, let's not forget Conor McGregor threw a dolly through a bus window and went up 2 spots in the pound for pound rankings because of it. So I mean,
that dolly must have been heavy.
Seriously, I mean, I don't know. Let's not
Yeah,
say
I think a Hall of Fame would be awesome.
I'd love it.
A real legitimate, unbiased Hall of Fame.
Right.
Because when Sakuraba was inducted, it's like, oh yeah, definitely. But
yeah, for that
guy has
win over Conan Silveira and lost to Conan Silveira. Hall of Fame run.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing about you're not going to write anything home about that UFC career, but if that's all you've seen, you haven't seen the magic that was Kazushi Sakuraba, Man,
I miss Sakuraba's Pride entrances.
Yeah, I miss a lot of what he brought to the game.
Yeah,
he brought a showmanship, but he brought an in-ring creativity to the game that made you go like, whoa. Like it looked like he was just kind of trying things in there sometimes. He was very tough to figure out, and the guy fought anybody, any weight, like truly. Yeah. It's a shame that he got taken advantage of a little too much by the promotion, but the guy's a surefire Hall of Famer.
I remember watching Pride 2003 Total Elimination a couple months ago, and seeing Sakuraba fight Vanderlei for the third time, and maybe it was the second time. I don't remember, second or third time.
Which card was it?
Pride Total Elimination 2003. I think it was the third time.
So that he fought for the title the second time against Vanderlei.
Yeah. So this was the third time.
2000. I think it was called Championship Chaos.
Right. So this was the third time he got knocked out. And Boss Rutan's talking about how Sakuraba needs to retire. Mm-hmm. He went on to fight for like 15 more years. 15 more years. Oh man.
He needed a lot of tape.
No kidding.
A lot of tape.
No kidding. Oh man. The only person that had more tape when they fought Sakuraba was Hein Gracie. Remember Hein Gracie?
He had the blue tape.
He had the blue tape.
The blue tape everywhere.
God.
But yeah, Sakuraba, his tape was like hair growing. It's like you see him in his next fight, he's got more.
Yeah.
And he's got more, and then he's got like a cast on, and then we're going to the other knee.
Right. I love when he weighed in with muscles drawn on.
Oh yeah, that was classic.
God. Smoking a cigarette.
There's nobody that cool.
No.
In MMA in the US.
No, and the best part is, like, look at the impact that Sakuraba had on you and I. He didn't speak a lick of English.
Yeah, zero.
And people say you can't get over in the States without speaking English. Watch tape on Sakuraba.
Yeah.
But you and I are kind of MMA nerds.
Yeah,
so
we
take
are.
it for what it is. All right, that pretty much does it for us. I appreciate you staying up late. If you missed any part of this broadcast, you can check it out on patreon.com/between rounds, or check it out archived on YouTube at Cappers Direct. For Mike and Miller, I am TJ DeSantis. Thanks for listening. You just got beat down after the bell on Between Rounds Radio.
The preceding podcast was a TJ DeSantis production. Comments, questions, and inquiries can be directed to DeSantisProd@gmail.com.